Science fiction is a massive genre with a long and robust history. And it's a genre that kind of serves two different purposes. One, it allows us to explore philosophy, ask big questions about things like human and technological advancement, responsibility, possibility, social dynamics. And two, much less seriously, it allows us to go, wow. Science fiction is an exploration of time and space. It allows us to make up whatever we want that may or may not be possible and explore that and go, wow. And for both of those reasons, I love sci-fi. So let's explore some of the best modern sci-fi novels that you may not have read. Or you might have. I don't know, I'm not you. The classics are classics for a reason, and you've probably read Frankenstein, my favourite novel ever. You've probably read the works of H.G. Wells, Isaac Asimov, the incredible, wonderful and charming Douglas Adams. You've probably read Dune, and you might have even read one of my personal favourites, Flowers for Algernon, and the masterful Kindred. But here are 10 that you might not have read. If you have, good for you. They're all great. First up is The Hierarchies by Roz Anderson. This is a fantastic modern sci-fi novel published by Dead Ink. I adored this book. It is, on the surface, nothing special. It's another book about artificial intelligence and the human design of robots that serve us. But this is also a feminist sci-fi book. A book about social dynamics, a book about social responsibility. In a world that could be parallel to ours or maybe slightly in the future, we have people and we have robots, those who are born and those who are created. And our protagonist has been created. She is a sex robot called Sylvie. She serves a relatively wealthy married man. She lives in his attic and she services his needs, which are not all sexual. Some of them are romantic and social. They play chess and board games together. They talk together. But her husband also has a human wife who is pregnant. She knows that Sylvie exists, and she allows her husband to just go upstairs and get his jollies. But eventually something happens that encourages Sylvie to realize she should run away. She needs to leave this place. It's not safe for her. There are mysteries here. There are things much darker than she realizes, darker than her own life already seems to be. I was so impressed with how this book handles gender dynamics on social, romantic, sexual, and familial levels. The responsibilities and roles of people within families, traditional gender dynamics that need to be deconstructed and thrown away altogether, and what that looks like. And of course, the age-old trope of artificial intelligence and things created by humans and our responsibility for those things being explored through a new lens in a different way, in a feminist way. I love this book. It's excellent. One that you might have read or at least seen Alex Garland's film adaptation of is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. It took me a while to get to this book, but when I did, I was so impressed by it. It's a doozy. It's a kind of Lovecraftian thing, but it's also kind of an eco-novel. Annihilation is set in a strange and dangerous area on the coast of the United States. It's a place where strange things happen. A place uninhabitable by humans. A place that we have run away from and are now sending teams of scientists inside of to investigate and try and understand. The team we follow is a group of women who are like the 12th or 13th expedition into this strange area. None of them are given names, just their roles. And when they get inside this area, they discover a strange tower that burrows into the earth, a monstrous creeping creature that lives there and writes messages on the walls out of living things like moss and flowers. They also find clues from previous expeditions. There's a lot of mystery here. I've talked about this book before in other videos and articles that you can go check out. I have a lot of ideas about it. The way that it handles mystery and the way that it handles storytelling is really fascinating. The role of the character, the role of the team. It's also a really short novel, and it's one that would kind of benefit from several reads. I feel like that's a good way to respect this novel, is to read it multiple times and try to understand what it's getting at. It's a book that I often find myself just thinking about. I sometimes just stop and ponder it, and I need to give it a reread. It's also the first in a trilogy, and I haven't read the other two yet, but this is very, very engaging. This is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone is an amazing book. It's really, really short, and it packs so much into its brevity. It's a romance of sorts. It's set in a very, very far-flung future where you have two enormous empires fighting for control over the galaxy. They both have access to time travel and travel over long distances, and they are perpetually at war. And our protagonists are agents of these two empires. They are the best at what they do. They travel through time and space, completing missions, and twisting the time-space continuum in the favor of their empire. It's a really clever and fun and dynamic approach to time travel and the ways that we should lean into the butterfly effect to get what we want. But these two agents are becoming disenchanted by what they do and by the people they work for. They send each other notes back and forth, at first taunting each other, daring each other to do things, and then eventually admitting to each other that they are bored and becoming disenchanted. And that turns into a love story. It's brilliant. You go from a war on a distant planet full of mechs like Gundam to a journey back to Shakespeare's London and Plato's Greece. It's wild how much is journeyed through in this book. I love it to bits. It's so well written, it's so engaging, it's funny, it's dynamic, it's adorable in some ways. But it's also full of big sci-fi concepts and ideas. How do you make a space opera 200 pages long? These guys did it. Becky Chambers is probably the biggest name in sci-fi right now. Everyone knows her name, everyone loves her, and rightly so. She's written a whole bunch of books, a series of 4 books, another ongoing series, and this novella. This novella is a piece of hard sci-fi. Hard sci-fi can be a tough thing to describe. It's science fiction that's grounded in reality, grounded in actual science, stuff that may or may not be possible to do. And To Be Taught If Fortunate is a novella that asks us to consider human advancement, what we owe ourselves, what we owe our planet, what we owe each other as a community. It's pretty heartfelt in that way. And it tells the story of a group of explorers who are part of a grassroots funded space agency, and they have been sent off to a solar system full of planets and moons that they need to explore. And there is specific science and technology that's been discovered that helps them get what they need and do what they need to do. There is a kind of biotechnology that slightly alters their genetics and allows them to adapt to really hot, really cold, really dense climates. And as they go, as they travel from planet to planet, moon to moon, they discover things. They encounter challenges they didn't expect. And we get to know them as people and as a group dynamic. It's a really, really charming novella. It's a wonderful example of hard sci-fi, but also how we can still care about the people, the characters, the dynamics within sci-fi. It doesn't just have to be concepts, it can be about people. And Chambers manages to juggle those two things, both the conceptual hard sci-fi side of it and the human side. Sea of Tranquility is a book I read fairly recently. I am a massive fan of Emily St. John Mandel. I've talked about her before. And this is my favourite book of hers. It's a fantastic time travel sci-fi novel. And it's very disjointed. We begin in the early 20th century with a British aristocrat who doesn't like his family, doesn't like the British Empire. He's a bit of a rebel. And so his family cast him out to Canada and he ends up on Vancouver Island where he meets a weird guy who claims to be a priest but definitely isn't. And that's how the first chapter ends. That's it. And then we jump forward to the present day. And then we jump forward again about 200 years to someone who lives on a moon colony. And then we jump another 200 years into the future. At this point, we're in the year 24 something. We meet who is arguably our protagonist, and from the halfway point, everything reverses, and we go back through these places we've already been. If you want to know more, I've talked about it in more detail in another video, but Sea of Tranquility is a beautiful, beautiful novel that so eloquently and elegantly explores time travel. And it has a wonderful twist that I'm happy to give away. Not the twist itself, just the fact that there is a twist. Just look forward to that. About halfway through the book, everything changes and you figure out what all of this is about. What these characters are trying to achieve, what they're trying to understand, what the point of all of these hops through time is, and I was amazed. I tore through this book very, very quickly. It's another short one that I loved to bits. Emily St. John Mandel is so good at exploring specific genres. She's done post-apocalypse, she's done thriller, and here she shows that she really understands sci-fi and the mechanics of it. Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie is the only sci-fi novel in history to win the Nebula, the Hugo, the Locus, and the Arthur C. Clarke Award. That's incredible. And I get it. I get why. This is an amazing, epic space opera about an AI. This AI was once in control of an enormous starship and an army within that ship. This one AI controlled a whole army of drones and the ship itself. The ship serves an empire that is hungry to eat up other planets, colonies, civilizations. And at one point, something happened that caused our AI protagonist to become locked and trapped within a single unit, one foot soldier. And now they are looking to get revenge. Because it turns out the thing that went wrong was the responsibility, the fault of the leader of the empire themselves. This is an absolute doozy, a kind of revenge tale, a story about what is possible when it comes to AI, but more explicitly, it's a book about colonialism and empire. What empires do, what crimes they commit, what atrocities, and how we set those things right, or at least get revenge for them. But it's also a book that's going to confuse you. In the beginning, trying to get your head around what is going on, the fact that we flip back and forth between when our protagonist was a massive AI, when they were multiple people, and when they are now one person, stranded almost on an icy, forgotten world. And the fact that when the Empire absorbs other civilizations, they actually take a portion of the community and turn them into drones to feed this AI, to grow this army. It's absolutely wild. There are incredible sci-fi concepts here. A wild, mad, beautiful, intense space opera. One of the best sci-fi novels you'll ever read. A Memory Called Empire is kind of similar. This is a book about empire, again, about colonialism, but it's also very similar to Game of Thrones in that it is intensely about politics. Again, you have an empire that is eating up other colonies, but you have a person from a small mining colony who is an ambassador to this giant empire, and she's replacing someone who was definitely assassinated. And so she's trying to figure out how her predecessor was assassinated, what the Empire's big plans are, how she can keep her colony from being absorbed and annexed. There's a lot going on, but it is very intensely politics from the inside. And it really is similar to the first Game of Thrones book, where you've got someone who is now inside the big machine of politics, trying to figure out how their predecessor was killed and what the machinations of all this are, the philosophy, the politics, the dynamics, the machinery. It's fantastic. Very, very engaging political sci-fi. This one might not be for everyone. Do You Dream of Terror 2 by Temi O. It's definitely a book that's going to divide people. Some will love it, some really won't, and I understand both sides completely. It's a coming-of-age story about a group of teenagers who go on a one-way mission to a planet far away that's going to take about 23, I think, years to get there. And these kids have been training for this mission their whole lives. We need to get to this planet because we're killing ours. So far, so relatable. And so these kids, along with a group of more mature and experienced astronauts, are going to get to Terra 2 and help colonize it. They're going to be the first people to establish a base on this planet before more of us join them eventually. And so we watch them come of age on a massive journey through space, trapped in a small ship together where tensions are really, really high and anything could and probably will go wrong. It blends the coming-of-age teen drama with the science fiction. You're either going to love the sound of that or you're really not, and I don't blame you either way. I enjoyed it. It's not perfect. You might not have read it, and you might want to. Check it out if you do. In Ascension by Martin McInnes is one of the best novels I have ever read in my entire life. Not just science fiction, just full stop. Best books. This is incredible. A true masterpiece of a novel that I love almost more than I can put into words. I have a dedicated video about it that you can go and watch. I can't tell you how incredible this book is. It follows a young Dutch woman who is a marine biologist, a microbiologist. It's set in the present day, and we follow her on a journey that begins as an expedition out into the ocean near the Arctic Circle. I think it's the Arctic Circle. Anyway, ocean expedition. She heads out because they want to investigate a deep sea vent and try and learn more about the things that live down in these vents so that we can learn more about human evolution, about biology in general, about how things evolved, how things changed, how climate changed, all sorts of things. They discover something interesting. And this leads our protagonist to end up working on a NASA-style base out in the Mojave Desert. She spends a little bit of time there, and then discoveries happen again, revelations happen that eventually lead her to get on a ship headed for the furthest edge of our solar system. This is a journey that takes her across oceans, deserts, and space. But it's not just the journey. It's the point of the whole thing. It's the metaphor. It's the philosophy of it. It's the size and scale and scope of it. But it's all so daringly simple. This is a book about human exploration, about possibility, about what we can and can't achieve, what we should and shouldn't do with our time, with our minds, with our technology, with our abilities. It's an incredible story about who we are, who we were, how we got here, and how beautiful all of that is. The beauty of existence itself. Oh my God, I love this book. In Ascension is perfect. It's one of my favorite novels ever. Please read it if you haven't. And finally, I'm going to end on a kind of sad note because this book is dark. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu is something else. If you've already read it, you know what I'm talking about. This is a pandemic novel. We begin with a scientist who is pretty old at this point. His daughter is also a scientist, but she was part of a team who was stationed in a crater in Siberia to investigate the permafrost because there is a genuine worry, this is real, that ancient diseases that have been frozen in the permafrost for thousands or millions of years may thaw out with climate change, get into our water, and kill everyone. So she was sent to investigate that, but she died while she was there. And so her dad, who's also a scientist, goes to investigate, goes to fill his daughter's shoes. While he's there, the exact thing we're all scared of ends up happening. A virus that was frozen thaws out and makes it into our oceans and takes hold of the human race. And it's a disease that mostly affects children, stops them reaching adulthood, kills them before they can get there. From there, it's kind of a short story collection that slowly moves through time from the present day into the future and how society, how humanity adapts to this disease. And it goes to some dark and strange places. It's about technological and scientific advancements, the way that society adapts, the way that the family adapts, how a disease that kills children and seems to be unbeatable will change the course of human history. It's bleak, it's scary, it's got big ideas that are very relatable to a possible future of ours. It'll frighten you in its bleakness, but it's also an incredible exploration of science fiction, the ways that science could help us survive, as it always has. How we adapt, how we grow, how we survive. It's not a happy book, but it's a very, very good one. There you go. Those were 10 incredible sci-fi novels that I wholly recommend. All of them modern, all of them worth reading. Many of them will become classics in the decades to come. And I also mentioned a bunch of books that are classics now that you should go read if you haven't already. Cool. Go check all these out. If you enjoyed this, if this was useful, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I would really, really love your support. My patrons help me pay my rent. They help me keep everything going. They help me make as many videos as I do, and I would really appreciate your support on Patreon. I have loads of benefits for you to check out. So go look that up, support me on Patreon if you can, and subscribe for books.